You claim to have had issues all your life. What causes that to occur? I'm simply one of those faces, you know? My face is disliked by others. What sort of demonstration did you stage? You said, I'm not sure. A peace-promoting commercial campaign. John Lennon never remained silent when he had something to say. Some people didn't like what they heard, but everyone heard it. Whether it was about God, music, or even war, Lennon was honest. Remember when he claimed that Jesus was not as famous as the Beatles? For that one line, radio stations banned their music, fans destroyed CDs, and death threats were made. However, Lennon was indifferent to the response. All he wanted was to be himself, not to win favor. That frankness not only rocked the world, but the music industry as well. Because John didn't keep his dislike of another artist to himself, it was noisy. He informed everyone. For everyone, he ruined it. Despite being a calm individual, Lennon did not get along with everyone. Ego was a factor at times. Sometimes it came down to skill. Sometimes he didn't enjoy their music at all. We identify the 5 rock stars that John Lennon detested the most by examining interviews, song lyrics, and vintage recordings. There are still a lot of personal grievances, strong beliefs, and musical conflicts on this list. Because John Lennon fought with words rather than firearms, it all started with a man he could never fully escape, loathed and loved. Paul McCartney first, from siblings to rivals. Most people consider John Lennon and Paul McCartney to be the dream partnership that created the Beatles. Some of the greatest rock tunes ever were written by them. They frequently collaborated on songs, exchanging melodies and words like best friends completing one another's sentences. However, many people are unaware that they had some difficult moments together, particularly as the Beatles began to disband. They were first like singing Soulmates in Liverpool when they were youngsters. They topped the charts and toured all over the world. In addition to sharing hotel rooms and lengthy bus travels, they enjoyed writing music. But as time passed, things started to shift. It was evident by 1968 that they were not getting along. They felt like they were becoming more and more different as individuals and musicians, battled more, and couldn't agree on the direction the band should go. When the Beatles officially broke up in 1970, their fans were devastated. Given that Paul filed a lawsuit to sever the band's commercial ties, many believed he was responsible for the split. That maneuver infuriated John, and it led to a musical altercation, something that rarely occurs, even between rock stars. Paul made his debut with the song Too Many People from his soul album Ram, released in 1971. The songs contain numerous clues about John and his wife Yoko Ono. John had serious intentions. He then responded with the cruel song How Do You Sleep? It was critical of Paul's abilities as well as his attitude. The only thing you did was yesterday. A jab at one of Paul's favorite Beatles songs was said insultingly. John's diss tune featured guitar playing by George Harrison, which further exacerbated the situation by revealing his position in the argument. John ridiculed Paul's song Another Day as well, claiming that Paul wasn't all that wonderful without the Beatles. Even if their relationship was difficult at times, it's crucial to keep in mind that they had a strong bond. Years later, John expressed his continued concern for Paul and his longing for their friendship. However, they became rivals in the years following their split, and Lennon's rage was evident in songs that fans still listen to and consider today. Second, John Lennon was a rock rebel, and his songs Blood, Sweat, and Tears were too smooth for his taste. Especially when it came to music, he didn't hesitate to express his opinions. He wasn't scared to criticize bands that he believed were receiving too much credit as a result. Blood, Sweat, and Tears was one band he was pursuing. They had a refined, almost upscale sound and combined jazz and rock elements. But to Lennon, it all sounded like noise that was making an excessive effort to be significant. In 1971, Rolling Stone magazine asked John Lennon what he enjoyed best about the radio at the time. He gave a resounding no. He claimed that until he was preparing to release his own music, he rarely even listened to the top 10. He would listen to a few records just before recording, but not because he was thrilled about new music. It was merely to observe the changes. What was it he said? Not at all. His words, nothing really happened. Then he truly relaxed. When questioned directly about Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Lennon didn't mince words. I don't like the blood, sweat, and tears, he said. I believe all of that. Hello. He paused to reflect, then went on with a scathing analogy. He believed that, like jazz, rock and roll was becoming too complicated and phony. He claimed that it was teeming with fake deep thinkers who were attempting to appear intelligent and imaginative. He didn't think it was true. Some admirers speculated that Lennon might have had another cause for his rage. At the 1970 Grammy Awards, Blood, Sweat, and Tears took home the award of the year. The Beatles' final album, Abbey Road, also failed to win the prize. It's difficult to overlook the time, even if Lennon never stated it was the reason he didn't like them. The thing that appeared to annoy Lennon the most was how smooth and pristine their sound was. He believed that type of music was not rock in the sense that it should be, rebellious, honest, and emotional. Lennon wanted rock stars to be more like street singer-songwriters, whereas Blood, Sweat, and Tears was more like a smooth-talking music school instructor. Lennon was not interested in collecting accolades for his music or receiving positive reviews. It has to do with being truthful. Blood, Sweat, and Tears, in his opinion, made an effort to be too pretentious and not hard enough to be genuine. Third, Joan Baez's folk music, which John Lennon found intolerable. Particularly when it comes to music, John Lennon never told lies. Additionally, he expressed his distaste for country artists such as Joan Baez. In a 1971 interview with Rolling Stone, Lennon actually didn't mince words. Like most people, Lennon wasn't attempting to be kind. He immediately stated, "I never liked the fruity Judy Collins and Baez and all that stuff," without thinking twice. He placed Baez with Judy Collins, another folk singer. This kind of folk music, in Lennon's opinion, was too pleasant, gentle, and smooth. It was nothing to do with the raw, hazardous music he enjoyed, or his rugged working-class upbringing. Why did humans get like this? Joan Baez was mentioned after the reporter compared Lennon's poignant and powerful song, Working Class Hero, to Bob Dylan's compositions. Lennon was deeply offended by that resemblance. He didn't think Baez should be in the same conversation as Dylan, but he did have some respect for him. Or if it was true that his music sounded like Dylan's, he even inquired, "Does it sound like Dylan to you?" Clearly angry, he asked the interviewer. Lennon believed that authentic folk music originated from the heart. Much like the struggles faced by Northern English miners, it was created by actual people who were going through difficult situations. Baez couldn't catch the same spirit, he thought. Her approach, in his opinion, was more about acting than feeling. Lennon simply could not get along with Baez, despite the fact that she had a powerful voice and performed protests that it was more about what her song stood for than it was about personal animosity. She was part of a scene that Lennon frequently believed was too clean, too safe, and not grounded in actual combat. Lennon's strong belief that music could reveal the truth made this even more compelling. He believed that rather than just creating beautiful music, artists should write about actual suffering. Because of this, Joan Baez never gained his respect, despite her notoriety and powerful voice. Lennon was more concerned with being authentic than with being liked. Fourth, is Frank Zappa a work of art or just loud noise? John Lennon had a reputation for being straightforward, and his feelings about Frank Zappa were no exception. Zappa and Lennon both had a reputation as unconventional artists. Despite their shared opposition to the system, Lennon wasn't entirely in agreement with Zappa's methods. Although he didn't always agree with Zappa's methods, Lennon understood how difficult it was for Zappa to cope with critics. John Lennon and Lou Reed both enjoyed Zappa's constant disparaging remarks about those who didn't get his music. However, there was one significant distinction. Lennon didn't appreciate that Zappa had to constantly boast about his intelligence. In fact, Lennon allegedly claimed that Zappa was constantly shouting to attract attention and demonstrate his intelligence. "Sons of B, what do I need to do to show you what I can do?" Lennon quoted Zappa to demonstrate how the musician was constantly attempting to defend himself from detractors. Lennon recognized Zappa's anger, but he felt it was a touch excessive. "I know what Zappa is going through," Lennon remarked. "I just went back to school. I've received criticism and grades from teachers." Lennon was aware that Zappa was a misunderstood artist, just like him. However, he wasn't always pleased with Zappa's handling of it. Lennon didn't always like Zappa's bravado and arrogance. Although Lennon appreciated Zappa's defiance of the status quo, he took issue with the way Zappa appeared to demand respect. Lennon believed that true artistry shouldn't be shouted from rooftops. It should originate from the art itself rather than from self-promotion. Despite these distinctions, Lennon did acknowledge Zappa's abilities. "I kind of admire Zappa," he stated, acknowledging that Zappa had a sincere approach to art with which he could identify. Ultimately, however, Lennon found it difficult to truly appreciate Zappa's music because of his flamboyant demeanor. Their friendship resembled a conflict between two individuals who had similar beliefs but disagreed on how to express them. Lennon liked to write songs that were honest rather than pretentious. Nevertheless, Zappa was all about stating his opinion clearly. The fifth is this: the fallen idol, Bob Dylan. The relationship between John Lennon and Bob Dylan was both fascinating and challenging. Lennon was greatly affected by Dylan and looked up to him in the early days of the Beatles. Dylan inspired Lee Lennon to write more intimate songs, and the two of them had some special moments together. However, Lennon's admiration for Dylan gradually waned, particularly after Dylan had a change of heart. Lennon's perspective on music and life in general was altered by the marijuana that Dylan provided him. In this sense, Dylan became a hero to Lennon, who viewed him as a mentor who improved his poetry. Dylan's poetry greatly influenced the Beatles' Rubber Soul and Revolver recordings. However, this link did not endure indefinitely. In the late 1970s, Lennon's attitude about Dylan began to shift. When Dylan released the contentious album Slow Train Coming, he underwent a significant transformation. His new life as a Christian began at this point. Known for being a devout atheist, Lennon was deeply offended when Dylan converted to Christianity. Lennon attacked Dylan's new religious beliefs and music in a 1979 tirade that was recorded. Dylan had previously been Lennon's hero. He mocked Dylan's recent conversion to Christianity by remarking, "He wants to be a waiter for Christ." When Lennon called the songs Run or Once on the album embarrassing, he didn't hold back. Additionally, he described the background music as meh and the singing as really pathetic. But it wasn't just Dylan's shift of faith that caused Lennon to lose faith in him. As an artist, Dylan had also undergone significant change. Dylan was once a wise and poetic artist, but Lennon believed that was no longer the case. He stopped doing other things because his new identity and message had become too significant to him. This change was significant to Lennon because Dylan had previously influenced him. Lennon enjoyed playing music that was thought-provoking and intelligent. However, as Dylan's sound evolved, Lennon began to view him less as a musical genius and more as an elderly man who was making an excessive effort to make a point. Not only did Lennon not enjoy Dylan's music, but he was also emotionally offended by the notion that someone he had looked up to had undergone such drastic transformation. This served as Lennon's wake-up call. Nothing in the music industry, not even the legendary Bob Dylan, is permanent, and even the biggest stars might fail. Number 6. The evolution of John Lennon's dislike. Numerous changes occurred throughout John Lennon's life and career, both in his personal life and in his music. When he was younger, he was influenced by different artists. Paul McCartney and Bob Dylan were idols to him. However, John Lennon's perspective and feelings for those artists evolved as he grew older and traveled the world. Artists like McCartney, Blood, Sweat and Tears, Joan Baez, Frank Zappa and Bob Dylan were not always disliked by Lennon. This is what distinguishes his distaste for them. It was usually about the values that these artists upheld. Lennon, whose activism and music were continually pushing the envelope, believed that the artists were either giving up on their work or pausing to make progress. For McCartney, it was the impact the breakup of the Beatles had on his personal life and career. Joan Baez and Blood, Sweat and Tears, on the other hand, were divided due to their differing views on music and how each should contribute to the music industry. However, Lennon's ideas weren't final. As the years passed and he gave his own life more attention, he frequently had second thoughts about these artists. His shifting opinions demonstrated both his personal development and the evolution of the music industry. Lennon never paused to consider his words. Despite his critical opinions of other artists, they demonstrated his strong appreciation for originality, inventiveness, and the never-ending pursuit of truth. Lastly, we can see how the mentality of an artist who was constantly questioning, pushing, and reconsidering everything around him operated through Lennon's strained relationships with these singers. The things that will endure are his songs and his attitude toward the world and its creators. Even if Lennon and his buddies didn't always agree, he was constantly seeking out new things, something tangible, something significant.